I'm not cool enough for her, and she just wants to hang out with her friends anyway. So
Well, I think that playing poker is a pretty cool job, and going to Playboy parties, I guess that's not something girls appreciate. Hey everybody, today I've got someone who I actually learned from when I was moving up in the stakes. One of the old school legends of CardRunners. He's, by the time he graduated high school, apparently he had a $250,000 bankroll, and he won the biggest ever session recorded on Full Tilt Poker for $4.2 million. He's got 6 World Series bracelets, and is also a family man. And who knows what else he's got going on. Brian Hastings.
thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So it's a bit of a, well, I did know you're a family man of sorts, where I did know that you're like engaged, basically. I did not know about all your other accomplishments in poker. I didn't know that you, on top of having success at No Limit and PLO, you also had quite a lot of success in the mixed games and tournaments. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool.
Well, I've bricked the PPC every time I've played it, so I mean, you wouldn't know, but thank you.
Yeah, PPC specialist. It's my thing. Yeah. So tell me a bit about this high school situation. I believe it's true. You've made $250,000 by the time you graduated high school. How did this happen?
It is true. Yeah. So, I mean, like many of our generation, I was in high school when the poker boom started, like, Chris Moneymaker winning the main event. And all of a sudden, the WSOP and WPT were on TV everywhere. And yeah, I just kind of started out by getting together with my high school friends to both like watch some of those broadcasts and then just like play little home games, like, $5 buy-in tournaments and stuff. And then I had actually had a teacher in high school who I found out was having success playing online. He told me and some friends one day that he had made more money playing online than teaching in the previous year. And I was like, whoa, you can make money doing this like that? So yeah, a few friends tried to put like small amounts of money online. Like in my case, I had a friend deposit with like his mom's credit card and then transfer me $50. That's how I got started. And then I think I probably broke even for the first 6 to 12 months or so, and then started just running it up really fast after that. And by the time I graduated, it's true, I had about $250,000 on, this was all an ultimate bet at the time. And yeah, then went to college and started writing tuition checks every semester, and it was cool.
All right, nice. Was that No Limit, or was it at something else? You're just playing No Limit heads up or Ring, or what was going on?
At that point, it was all No Limit. Yeah, a mixture of formats though. I played a little bit of everything. Really, I played some, plenty of, I'd say mostly cash games at the time, but also some tournaments. Like I actually recall having a tournament win, like winning like a $10 tournament for 3,000. That was like a huge like bankroll booster at the time. Like when I was like really playing smaller, trying to run it up. I played like sit and goes too. Like I remember playing like 6 person, like $200 sit and goes on UB. Some heads up, heads up sit and goes, heads up cash. Just but all No Limit though at that point. Yeah.
Awesome. I happen to have a bit of a similar story. It took me about that long to start making some real money. Also, I mean, I broke even. I actually got smashed in the beginning. My story is a little bit more dramatic. It's my style is I get smashed a lot in the beginning and end up crushing in the end. But yeah, I didn't have shit during high school. I can tell you that. I worked at McDonald's at the end of my first semester in college,
Mm.
so I had that badge of life.
So when I was first running it up in high school, I was working at Little Caesars Pizza at the time as well. And then at one point I had like made enough online. And then I actually started making videos for CardRunners when I was still like 17 also. So I was like, oh yeah, mom and dad, I don't need to work at Little Caesars anymore.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I mean the cool thing about poker is you can scale small amounts pretty quickly. That's very unique.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe in drop shipping you can. I don't really know where else. It seems very hard in some other areas. So okay, so apparently you started off in mixed, and all of that. And how did you become a card runners coach? What's the story behind all of that? Because you must have had quite some success by the time card runners was up and running, one of the first
Um,
training sites for poker.
yeah, I think I first got noticed by those guys just because I was one of the first members when they first launched the site. Like again, I was still probably 16 or something, but I joined CardRunners as a member. And I think, so they kind of like knew my screen name from being a member, and then I was like playing in the same games with some of the CardRunners like coaches on UB and doing really well, and like so they kind of took notice of me that way. So that's how I first met them. And actually, yeah, I think the first live poker trip I took was going to Aruba when I was like a sophomore in college. Or no, I'd been to Vegas once before actually, but like, yeah, basically like the first times I traveled for poker was like with the CardRunners crew. Was the point.
Oh, really? Wait, to Vegas or to Aruba?
So right after I turned 18, I actually went to Vegas for like a week, and like they were out there. It was during the World Series, like they were playing some events and stuff, but like also just like partying. So yeah, I just came out for a week, played like some online poker in like the house they rented, and went out some to like restaurants and clubs and stuff.
Oh, well, that's awesome. I ended up going. Yeah, first met Doug my first trip to Las Vegas. Yeah, I ended up meeting Taylor KB, all the card runners guys, and we ended up battling. I ended up battling all the card runners guys, and you also. I
Yes.
remember, yeah, back in the day, 5100. Those are the good old days. 100, 200. It was 400, 800 mixed. But
We had some
now
battles.
we're um, we're podcasting. How about that? Was there like a point where you started to really crush nosebleeds? Was it all just like smooth sailing, or did you have any challenges along the way? Just become a card runners, a card runners instructor, and then just poker's simple and easy. What's Tell us more about the challenges. What happened in between?
Yeah, during my initial time moving up stakes online, I didn't really encounter too much resistance after the first point of like going from breaking even to winning. But once I started moving up stakes, it just felt like it was going really fast. Just moving up from 50 cent a dollar to 1.2 to 2.4. It just felt like every 2 or 3 weeks I was able to move up. Obviously, the games back then were much softer than anybody could fathom in today's era. And also, I ran really hot, so those two things help a lot. Um, but yeah, it was pretty smooth for me. I don't even remember going up to nosebleeds or anything being like a huge point of resistance. Just kind of kept, moving up one stake to next stake, and it was
It's like
relatively smooth for a
steps
while
on a
anyway.
staircase, right? Just walk up
Yeah,
one.
just move up to the next step. Yeah.
Okay, no downswings. I have not heard that one before. Did you ever have downswing? You must have had a downswing at some point.
Yes. Oh yes, yes, yes. I had big downswings. Yeah, I mean, especially once I started getting into like PLO more and stuff, then yes, I mean, it's a lot of large downswings at the certain times.
So tell us the story about this like 4.2 million session. I think it's 4.18 to be precise with the cylinder. Um, yeah, I mean, what was the story leading up to deciding to play them at super high stakes? Uh, Whatever details you'd like makes sense for you to say. Was there any like was it did you just think this guy sucked and that was it, or what?
So from what I recall, maybe like a few months. So the session happened in December of '09. So I was
Mm-hmm.
squarely in college. I remember it was during finals week actually. So I was like studying for finals, but like had was watching Cole South play him online, and I like got on the wait list just in case, just for like maybe later. But anyway, backflash a couple months. I remember, yeah, he had kind of emerged on the scene and was just like battling everybody at high stakes, and it was really interesting. I mean, he was playing very aggressively, but seemed really tough. I remember one time, like October that year, I went to the Playboy Mansion to like some Halloween party with some other poker players, including the CardRunners guys, actually. And like the night before we went to the party, I battled him at like a few tables of heads up. I think it was 100, 200 no limit actually, if I remember correctly. And like, yeah, I thought he was pretty tough at no limit. So I think I kind of like backed away from him after that at no limit. But like when I, was playing, I was really confident in myself at PLO at that moment. Like I played Phil Ivey a few times heads up and like held my own and played, pretty much whoever would challenge me, I guess, at heads up PLO at that moment. And yeah, so I felt confident there. And like when I think that maybe the first time or two I played him, I thought he was a little bit, seemed relatively newer to PLO and like not as fundamentally sound as it in No Limit. So I felt that was a good spot. And yeah, so that kind of led up to that night. And like I said, I was just kind of on the wait list studying for finals. And then he had been playing Cole for a few hours prior to the match, I believe. And
You
yeah,
cut him all this week.
Cole was done. Cole needed a break, and so I hopped in. Yeah, he'd already been playing, and then as far as the match, I just recall at the beginning he was playing pretty tough, I would say, but I got like a 10 buy-in lead, so a million, playing 500, 1,000. And after that, he just went crazy and just started tilting really hard and, three betting a lot of hands and just doing crazy things in general. So yeah, that's how that
went. You actually caught him right after he smashed me. He smashed me for like 20 something buy-ins in No Limit and 100, 200. I lost like half my roll. So it was like a very like extreme moment, at least for me, and also to witness. I mean, I had never seen any win like that myself. But I remember specifically that it was kind of a crazy moment. Like you said, he was battling everyone at high stakes, like super high, and just like trying to run it up as much as possible. And he always is playing the best in the world at everything. So it's going to be hard to win.
Yeah, like he's certainly a really talented player. It still is. I mean, I played with him a little bit this year at the World Series, actually. Yeah, he's super talented player. But yeah, just like with the amount of like hours and game selection he was doing, like it's just really hard to sustain that.
Were you the best at PLO at that time? Would you say you were one of the best in the world?
I think so at that time. Yeah, not even close now. I don't hardly play PLO anymore. But yeah, at that time, that was my focus. And I mean, it was really amazing back then too. How if you just sat at like a lot of stakes of heads up PLO, just like because the good players would generally not play me, so like the action I would get when I got action was unbelievable usually.
Oh, well, how about that? Yeah, I remember I got lots of VIPs at PLO as well. I mean, at some point I had to switch. I mean, it's really important in poker to keep adapting to what's going on in some kind of way so that you can keep making money. It seems like you've been playing lots of tournaments since then. You just like switched to live poker. Is that what happened afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, there's a long time between, like 2009 was 14 years ago. So there's been a lot of time between now and then, but I certainly over time have transitioned more from cash games to tournaments and more from online to live, although I do still play a pretty good amount of online poker actually. So certainly rededicating myself to No Limit Hold'em a lot after I kind of, stopped really focusing on that for quite a few years.
And to why No Limit?
I think availability is a big one. I mean, for a while, like I'd say like my main games were mix, and then once there's kind of ceased being like enough good mix action to like really do that, it just didn't seem like I could just kind of focus on mix anymore. I had to like go back and do something else. So like you're saying, like shifting to the where the current climate is. So that was a lot of what led me back into No Limit. And I really do like tournaments. I've always liked it, but I think back in the day I was just doing really well at the cash games and never like fully applied myself at tournaments. So it's kind of a cool, interesting thing to do that and like actually finally really try to learn tournaments the best I can.
Yeah, I do think that there's lots of money in tournaments. Tournaments are going nowhere. That's one thing.
Also that,
learning
yes.
them. As far as actual like feasibility goes long term, tournaments are really a good place to focus on. I personally don't like them very much. If I had to do something, I would do tournaments. But as I would like make sure to play a decent amount. I mean, they're kind of super annoying because you either most of the time you just go nowhere, and then occasionally you're like top 3% or whatever it is. And everyone gets all excited and you could win, blah blah blah, and then you get in like fifth, and everyone's all upset, and you're upset that you got fifth, even though it's fifth out of like 800 people, and you're like, oh, but it's bittersweet, I didn't win, and all this bullshit.
I hear you on that. Yeah, like I enjoy like the gameplay of tournaments. Like I think it's strategically interesting. There's like all the different like stack sizes and phases of the tournament and all that. But yeah, like the results thing where you're just kind of like run your head against the wall for a while until you occasionally break through with a big score. That can get tiresome. So yeah, I mean, recently I've actually been focusing more on cash games, but still playing some tournaments. Whereas for a while I was like going kind of all out on tournaments.
Would you say that that there are many lessons that you've learned that would apply to today's market or today's group of young players trying to succeed? How would that look like if you were to do it all over? Because, I mean, I think you would know that it would be a lot harder than it was in the past. And I'm thinking, your track record's very successful. I mean, have you had a lot of success at everything, actually? So what have you considered that? Have you put yourselves in the shoes of the aspiring poker player today and what that path to success might look like?
Yeah, I have thought about that some. And so yeah, to be clear, it's very different. Like there's my path or Dan's path coming up is just not a thing nowadays. I would say like there's no can't just move up stakes every month or whatever. um, I do think it's more important now than ever to just like specialize, like just pick a format that you really want to get good at and do that. Whereas back in the day, I kind of dabbled in everything a little bit, and that like worked out in that climate. But I don't think that's like such a good idea now. Um, yeah, I think just kind of identifying a format that you think works well for you, whether it's no limit tournaments or PLO in general, I guess could be one. Or, I mean, no limit cash is, I mean, I've personally been diving back into no limit cash a lot recently, and I think that's an interesting one, but like there's certain limitations, like for example, live, I mean, it's hard if you get to like any kind of like decently high stakes that games tend to be private. So there's, if you're the kind of person who wants to deal with that or not, like, these are all factors. But I mean, I think, yeah, specializing in whatever format you think is great for you, and then just like really applying yourself and making sure to, work hard on it and study a lot and find a good group of people to talk poker with. These are all important things.
With the Discord I am creating, I'm attempting to facilitate a lot of these features. Well, the features of like finding group to study with and all of that. It's not ready yet, but that's one of the problems I want to solve because I think it's really important to have someone to study with.
Hmm.
Did you have anyone to study with actually, or you just learned on your own?
At the time, I mean, there were definitely people I like talk poker with. I wouldn't say it was like, well, I mean, I guess at some times I was like more heavily into like collaborative study with people like Brian Townsend and Cole South.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, also there were just like a lot of like loose conversations where like, I'd run a hand by a friend on AIM back in the day, RIP.
Okay, okay. That helped me at some point in various different kinds of games and all of that for sure. I want to say also I'd advise something. I would personally think to do something a little bit different. In that I think it's can be kind of rough to pick a game and focus on it unless I'm going to point out a couple caveats. But basically, there's a lot of games out there these days that don't necessarily have a lot of money in them. For example, No Limit Heads Up was not nearly as good now as it used to be. I don't necessarily advise going that path. And I think that unless someone like just really loves certain kind of game for some reason, it's probably a better idea to like it's actually a very common way to go in many sports. Actually, it's like in this book called Range, it's referred to as something like the Roger Federer route. And it's actually a far more common way of success than the Tiger Woods route, which is you just pick something and you just like drill it home, and now you're amazing at it, and you're just like a savant. The Have you ever read this book Range by chance?
I have not, but sounds interesting. I mean, I'm a big tennis fan and play some.
Oh, really? I had no idea. How
Mhm.
convenient. But yeah, basically, Roger Federer didn't really have a whole lot of success in a lot of avenues, and he just like tried a bunch of things, and then finally like picked one, and then he like, ran home. And I personally would advise something like that with poker, except to look at the profitability of a lot of these different games, and also like what's available to the players themselves that makes a lot of sense. It's useful to also try different formats at some point in some kind of way to at least to do a little bit to do like something like market research would be kind of an exaggerated term, but to try to see if there is actually any money in it. I mean, I did a lot of this myself, and maybe you did it too. But basically, to try different formats. First of all, because you might learn something in no limit, and second of all, or you might learn something in your main game, excuse me. And second of all, because there might be a lot of money in those sorts of games. Um, and Yeah, basically, I just think it's really dangerous to pigeonhole yourself in one spot. And if you have, a clear looking for all the different opportunities out there, this is a way to really skyrocket your results. And I think it's really necessary these days where, strategy is beaten to death and you just don't want to be battling against, like the perfect players all the time. You want to broaden your horizons a bit.
Yeah, I mean, so I definitely agree with you that at the beginning, at least, I think it's a great idea to like try a bunch of different formats to see what, appeals to you. It's just like, so you have a better idea than just like before you like dive in deeper to one of them. Yeah, I'm just saying, I guess like I think it's tougher, just like the strategy is so much more advanced now and the good players are so much better now that like it's hard to really like try to spread your focus too thinly and just like, try
Oh
to
yeah,
study
yeah.
several different games at once. Cause then I just feel like you're
Well,
not going to be able to match the people who are specializing in those formats.
oh, for
But there is definitely
sure.
something to be said for
That's
like dabbling some and like, learning formats, learning how to play games a bit and like, yeah, and getting a feel for what you like, what you don't like. And yeah, I agree with what you said too, that you can learn some things about other formats. Like, I can learn some cool things about No Limit by studying PLO, for example.
yeah, yeah. I agree with that. You don't want to study too much. You just want to like look around a little bit, is what I think. You don't want to like be half-assed 100%. You have to really be all in when you're doing these things. I'm kind of learning this the hard way with some real life endeavors. Like, oh shit, I like really put myself in like trying to run a podcast and also create a Discord is it's quite hard, and requires like a lot of time at minimum, and might just like be super hard anyway. But on top of other things too, I still play poker, but that once you master one thing, then you can like do other things, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Speaking of which, what else have you got going on these days? You said you play tennis. What else? Have you been doing anything besides poker and starting a family?
Well, yeah, the family's a big one. I mean, yeah, my daughter is almost 4 now, so certainly spend plenty of time with them. Just like being a husband and a dad, it's cool. But yeah, it's definitely made me appreciate the value of time a lot more. Like I feel like when I was like young and single, I just kind of wouldn't, kind of do whatever with my time and not really like think about it too much. Um, but yeah, being a having a family puts that in perspective a lot more, I would say. But yeah, other than that, I'm doing poker. I'm still I'm making training videos for Run It Once. Also just did a lecture for Pocket Queens last week that turned out pretty well, I thought. Got some good feedback there. Yeah, tennis is just recreational activity. And yeah, what else? I mean, those things take up a lot of time. um,
No,
hmm.
so are you focusing more on the learning aspect of poker? Is there any particular reason why you chose Pocket Queens to work with?
So Pocket Queens, for those who aren't familiar, is like a group of women in poker who are basically a group to get together, study together, learn together, just connect. And every week they have a guest lecturer come in and deliver a lecture on a topic. So yeah, last week I did like a lecture that turned out to be about an hour and 20 minutes on 3-bet pots and cash games. I know a lot of their previous lectures had been on tournament topics, so I just wanted to throw something different in there. But yeah, pretty cool group that they were like, it was like a Zoom call with, I think there were like maybe 5 or 6 women who participated, like asking questions and stuff. It was cool.
Nice. Well, I think it's great that the girls or women are coming together and making community. I mean, that's something that hopefully will bring more of them to the poker world. I've been trying to corral a few myself. Um, so tell us something about three red pots. What's the key to winning in three red pots, Brian?
Well, I would just say from myself, I mean, when I went back and like, analyzed my own game, I realized I was playing a bit too weak in 3-bet pots. Like, facing a 3-bet, just not playing tough enough, both in terms of not enough 4-bet bluffing and not enough calling with certain like kind of marginal hands that I was making a little bit too tight folds. And then also post flop. I mean, post flop's obviously very nuanced. There's a billion different boards and stuff, but yeah, just it's interesting. There's a lot to learn about just like defending your range properly in various spots and which hands we turn into bluffs on different runouts. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of nuance there, and certainly I'm still learning, but I feel like I've learned a lot in the last few months.
What's the biggest mistake you see people make?
I think I mean, playing too weak is a big one. Just yeah, just like against three bets, like not having enough four bet bluffs and such.
Oh, really?
I think that's a big one.
Okay, I
Not
think I could
not universally true,
see
by the way,
something.
but there are I mean, to be clear, like there are plenty of good regs who do have enough, but there are also plenty of regulars who I think do not have enough four bet bluffs and do not play tough enough against three bets.
Oh, sure. By the way, in my opinion, 9-4 offsuit gets into the 4 range every now and then.
Is that your favorite hand?
I just like I bluffed it recently of like a few players, just to like try it. I just thought it might work. Uh, on one of the streams, flop two pair. Obviously, that was the brilliant part.
Oh,
That
that's
was the
pretty sick.
skill part.
I didn't see that one. I'll send me a link to the hand later.
Yeah, I will say that uh, if your image is really good in Ring, then you can sometimes get away with. There's a lot of times where I think to myself, man, if this person just like four bet with any hand and just blast it off, I would probably fold an enormous percent of the time. There's a decent amount of players like that I think fall into that category, particularly if they have a very nitty image. It's just like, yeah, it doesn't happen that much. I would say it's very rare. It's like hard to have. It's just it's hard to have aces in those spots, or hard to have anything in a lot of those spots. To be honest, it's hard to have like a set or anything else to call. You have to have like aces or kings, I guess, to call. Some people fold kings in four pots, and I'm just thinking like, what do you
Yeah, like if
call
it's an
it?
opponent who like their value range is like aces plus, or aces are a set basically, and then yeah, so they can in theory get away with one time just bluffing anything, kind of like if you don't see it coming. Yeah, there's a lot of that weird adjustment game, especially in live poker, where like a lot of people just aren't playing like balanced at all. So there's
Mhm.
yeah certain players who you would not expect a three bet or four bet bluff to be coming from, so they could and because of that they could really get away with a lot if they change their mindset.
Oh yeah, yeah. So tell us more about the family life. How's that? How's that going? It seems to be very important for you these days. You seem to be very. It seems to be something you like really heavily know that your emotions are heavily involved in. That you're in that your emotions are heavily involved in. That you just really appreciate from talking to you.
Yeah. So yeah, coming up on my fifth wedding anniversary in December, and my daughter is about to be 4 in January. So she was actually born right in January of 2020, like right before COVID. So that was interesting. It's in terms of like raising her early while a lot of things were locked down, couldn't really go do a whole lot. Luckily, with little kids like that, I mean, going to the park is like a great way to do that, or just taking a walk. But yeah, I mean, they're huge. Like I certainly spend a lot of time, and a lot of my energy right now is just kind of like focused on finding the best balance between family and my poker career. So yeah, it's kind of like a daily thing, but luckily my wife Sonia is very supportive with it all. And
I was actually going to say, you actually read my mind a little bit. I was thinking, has balance always been something that came naturally to you? Because you said you were obsessed in the beginning. Uh, and I mean, now it seems much more relevant, and it has to be a bit because you have family. You can't just like neglect your kid. Uh, or is it something that you grew into?
so I think the one other time that I really had to like consciously make a big effort to balance was in college, because I did
Hmm.
graduate actually. Yeah, degree in economics. And yeah, that coursework took up a decent amount of time. So like balancing that and poker and my social life in college was interesting, and had to be intentional about that. Certainly it helped though that like poker was just generally going really well, and I didn't like need to make money right now at that moment or anything. And I was able to just kind of more like part-time poker to do that. Um, yeah, so now, but yeah, like now is like, poker is still my full-time job, and I have a family and I'm supporting them. So yeah, balancing this can be challenging. And, it's kind of every day I'm kind of trying to best think about how to optimize for that, I guess. And yeah, just do it, because I know like I have memories of like growing up, like my dad would always tell me that he regretted not spending more time with me when I was young. And I mean, from my perspective, it seemed like he was spending a lot of time with me and nothing was wrong. But like, I just can, hearing that regret from him, I just don't want to have the same regret later. So I want to make sure like I'm spending enough time with my young daughter, before she's like, I'm not cool enough for her and she just wants to hang out with her friends anyway. So,
Well, I think that playing poker is a pretty cool job, and going to Playboy parties. I guess that's not something girls appreciate. To looking at their dad, maybe not dad, maybe like your son or something. I did not graduate, by the way. I dropped out of college. I had to take game theory a third time in order to graduate, or switch majors.
Wait, you
and I was
failed
just not
you
having it.
failed game theory twice?
Yes, I did.
Wait,
Yes, I
how?
did. Makes a
Did
great
like
story, at least. Huh?
yeah, wait, how? Like I would just think you would be really good at that intuitively, but like maybe you just weren't going to class or something.
I was not going to class.
Yeah, okay, sure.
I mean, it's very different in the actual class, and it's more computer science oriented. I do remember some specific principles that apply, like the idea of something being recursive, and these ideas of like proving games, for example, that work. Some concepts applied, but the idea of recursively doing something over and over to its conclusion applies far beyond poker. You can just look at like what's inevitable in the way that the world works, because of what people, or what just things happen over and over, essentially. But same thing with poker, like you get to game theory by recursively playing exploitative. But if you and another player recursively
Mm-hmm.
try to exploit each other, that's when game theory is reached,
Mm-hmm.
or game theory optimal is reached, excuse me. As an example, um, are you using your degree for anything? Are you proud you got your degree?
I'm not really using it for anything, but yeah, I'm proud I got it. I took a lot of cool classes in college. I like, I think the social experience was valuable for me. Like, I mean, as a result of like obsessing over poker so much as a late teenager, I think I like needed some social development, and college was helpful for that. So, yeah, I mean, no regrets.
All right.
And I mean, and
Uh,
also like, it's not like I would rule out ever using it, but like, yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't know, who would care that I have a 15-year-old degree, really, but maybe they would. I
I,
don't know.
I mean, I don't know. If I got my computer science degree, I don't think I'd program anyway. I mean, I studied economics too, and I didn't really use it. I learned about utilitarian theory later, all this stuff. It actually kind of applies with poker logic. The utilitarianism would be like applying poker logic to overall happiness.
Mhm.
I don't think it really works for a variety of reasons, but some of its ideas are good.
Yeah,
If you're at all familiar,
I'm not super familiar with utilitarian theory, but I mean, maybe
uh,
a bit.
it's just trying to maximize happiness in this just like mathematical way. It's as if like, okay, you just like look at, okay, you've got like X people, how are we going to maximize their happiness?
Mhm.
There's some problems with it basically. But that's it in a nutshell. I think I'm not like a ethics
Yeah, that seems really
professor or
challenging
anything.
relating to happiness. Like, certainly did lots of that stuff in college relating to just like, profit maximizing or like stuff like that with like either, within a household or businesses or whatever. But like, yeah, maximizing happiness in an equation form seems challenging to me.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that became a bit of a challenge in a way was I personally, while I was doing poker, it occurred to me, okay, well, if I look at poker as purely something where I'm just going to make it as a living, it becomes a bit of a treadmill, a hedonic treadmill of sorts. Not a hedonic one, but a treadmill, a rat race of sorts,
Hmm.
but a limited one. And at some point, my my idea for like, okay, I could associate my career with how much money I can make shifted from I could associate with how much impact I can make. And it's actually seemed like a more appropriate way of looking at things, just
Hmm.
because the impact lasts longer. And seems like a much more interesting game, you can say. But a much bigger game, much more difficult game in many ways. I don't know if you
Yeah. Oh
had
yeah,
any
absolutely.
feelings like that. Hmm?
Yeah, I mean, certainly over the years, I've done my fair share of just like thinking about how I can make the most impact and just, identifying organizations that I believe in and like donating money and in some cases time to them. So,
Hmm.
yeah, definitely believe in general on trying to make the biggest impact we can. Yeah, I think in the last few years, again, with the family, like I think I've been largely focused on that, just making sure I'm like doing the best I can for them. But,
Hmm.
but, but, I'm still always trying to do the best I can in the world as well.
Awesome. Which causes do you like the most? What are your favorite causes or favorite ways to make an impact?
Some I've done a bunch with in the past. Have you ever done Kiva? It's a micro lending organization. Yeah, they basically do a bunch of micro loans to like people trying to, run businesses in poor countries.
Oh,
And
oh, you know
yeah,
what? I had that same idea. Damn it. But that's cool. Shit, maybe I should check it
Kiva.org.
out.
Maybe they'll bring you on as a partner. Um,
I actually should look that up. Shit, I'm gonna take a note. I'm gonna text it to you. Give me a second.
I mean, I
Yeah,
think Doctors Without Borders is a great organization too, and it's certainly doing some valuable work now and many times.
yeah. I mean,
Hmm.
getting people's health to a certain baseline, I think is really important. I know also your mental health is an area that you're interested in. Would you like to extrapolate on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say even dating before Black Friday, Black Friday for the younger out there was when the U.S. poker sites shut down in 2011. Um, but basically, yeah, I've always kind of had some mental health episodes, like mostly what I felt was depression up to that time. Later, I realized what I actually had was bipolar with some alternating depressive and hypomanic episodes. And certainly, I think Black Friday was a big trigger of that for me. And I think, yeah, I mean, I had a major depressive episode a few months after and kind of just like oscillating back and forth mental health for the next few years. So, yeah, it took a while for me to really get it under control. Luckily, I've been doing a lot better with that in the last few years. But certainly, I think mental health is a serious thing that is undertreated in many people, and I think there's still a big stigma amongst many people that just to tough it out and like like just deal with it. And yeah, again, I think I think a lot of people could benefit by just being more open and honest about their feelings and also understanding of others because I think in a lot of cases the problem is that people don't feel like they can open up because they won't be taken seriously enough or whatever. But I do think in my case, once I started opening up about it, was a big breakthrough for me because I was really surprised to hear how many other people had similar stories to me once I started opening up.
Yeah, relating to that, this whole idea of just like there's this common mentality that I see a lot of the time that I think is overdone. I think there's a lot of validity to it, but I think the real solution is a bit different. But it's this mentality of as you said, just get over it, just man up. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Whereas I don't see how it's gonna work for most people. I could see how there's got to be some point where the other people have to, step up. They have to actually take the effort. But
Yeah.
when a huge class of people is failing, yelling "man up" is not going to do anything. In the case of mental health, like there's usually reasons why people feel these kinds of ways, and as you said, they can't open up, so that can contribute to their mental health problems. And it also, I mean, I'm not a big mental health expert, but I know the reasons why I was having mental health issues. I mean, I've had, a handful of mental health issues myself. I was depressed as when I was 17. I mean, it wasn't really a secret why. I was just like, I didn't know where my life was going. And,
Hmm.
like I didn't, like I was horny and wanted to fucking talk to girls. I couldn't do it. Um,
Hmm.
and I didn't know what the hell to do. And, I didn't have that many friends and blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's some real reasons. It wasn't like, oh, just go man up. Uh,
Right.
and I mean, people might have similar kinds of things, especially these days, reasons for why they might be feeling that way. I mean, I'm not people probably have different reasons as well. Um, but I definitely think there's a lot more value. There's value in the man up philosophy, especially from the individual perspective, from one's own perspective. Like the like if we were to look at it from like looking at you or looking at me or thinking to ourselves, okay, we just got to deal with this somehow. Your only option is man up. But looking at it from the outside, it makes a lot of sense to find ways of making the situation easier to deal with. And that would help on a broader scale than just screaming man up. It's pretty poor strategy, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on that? And I want to know how you got out of it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think you make some good points there. So yeah, I think with like man up, like you're definitely right that like to some extent, yeah, it is like on you ultimately to like, fix your own mental health. But I also think that, yeah, I mean, just like the whole, like that whole dialogue, like man up can just lead someone to like think that they're not good enough. Like, just feel like they're, there's something wrong with them. And like, like I know in my case, I just, yeah, like I was very secretive. Like I felt ashamed to like really open up about it for it's like a long time, really, with most people. And yeah, I just kind of felt like I wasn't good enough, and it was a lot of the same for me too. Like socially, like I was like, yeah, I think I was like kind of socially underdeveloped, and yeah, like again, like I wanted to, get girls and stuff, and like my friends were all doing it, and I just like, it just wasn't happening for
I
me,
had
and
that too. It's
that,
like the most
um,
depressing thing when your
yeah,
friends are all talking about, oh yeah, like hooked up with this girl at this party, and they'd go around, and you're like, oh wait, what? I'm not having these experiences. That I remember very
right.
specifically.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Again, especially like I said, like my friends in high school were like jocks for the most part. So yeah, like they were all, they all had like girlfriends and were dating and stuff. And like, yeah, it just wasn't happening for me. And yeah, and just socially, it wasn't like just that. It was like, yeah, just socially too. Like I didn't feel like confident, like communicating really. Like it's not like I didn't talk at all, but like I was on the quieter side for sure. And yeah, I just didn't feel confident. And yeah, that really ate at me. And when I started to have success at poker, that was at least like something that I'd say helped, like it made people be like, oh wow, Brian, that's so cool that you're doing this, but like, and maybe got me a little bit more attention, but like at the end of the day it was just kind of like, it still felt kind of empty at that point to me, like because I wasn't, because I wasn't achieving in other areas that I wanted to. um so um yeah, so okay, so relating back to just like general mental health and like how to help people. um yeah, I mean, I know for me, like, therapy has helped me in an enormous amount, and I'm a huge advocate of that for sure. Like, I've had the same therapist now for about a decade, and I mean, at this point, I'm more doing like a once every month or two thing because I'm doing pretty well. But I still think regular therapy is a great thing. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that's helped me a huge amount, and also, I mean, uh, you know, certain medications have helped me a lot too. In my case, with this bipolar thing, lithium's been huge for me. But obviously, everybody's different. Before that, I tried a number of other different, drugs of various sorts, like SSRIs, um, and maybe, yeah, I guess mostly that. Nothing was really working. So, but yeah, so I tried lithium, I think, for the first time like 6 years ago, and that was a huge catalyst to improving. Also, just my wife is very understanding and supportive. That's been helpful a lot as well. So, yeah,
I think therapy could certainly work. One thing about therapy that I know for a fact is that the therapists do not necessarily do anything positive. It depends. You have to have a good one, is my understanding. Um,
true.
for the people listening out there, actually, they should try a bunch of therapists and see which one feels right and go with that. I mean, that seems to be quite important. That's just about roughly all I know. Um, I'm not, I can't give, I'm not licensed to give actual advice. That's just roughly what I know from people who have dealt with these sorts of things. I never really had no, I did actually when I was a little kid. But I don't know how much it helped me. What really did help me, in fact, was poker, but this would be the version of, and I guess this is what would happen for many of the people that would get out of it, is the version of, okay, we made it easier. Now there's something going on. And, that is if you have success at poker, that's one way of making the situation of whatever else is going on in your life a lot easier. Like, the question of not good enough, like, oh, there's something that makes you a little bit better. Um, and I will say that pretty much all my depression, a lot of my depressive feelings, I remember specifically was the feeling of not being good enough. I think people also do this thing where they try to help. I remember specifically there's just like spiritual teacher, not teacher, but like singer that would, you know, he felt bad for these people and he wanted to sing a song, you're enough, say it over and over. But my thinking was, how is this going to change how people feel? It is a very difficult problem to solve, partly because society effectively screams to people, with, I mean, scream is one way to put it, but it basically says in all kinds of different ways that aren't necessarily literal, you're not enough a lot of the time to many of these, guys who are younger, especially. And I mean, it's very, very hard to not resist that because basically you have to say, you, yeah, I am. And decide, okay, well, I'm going to do things where I am. You have to be almost delusional in certain ways to overcome that or find some kind of outlets to feel that way. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I was just thinking like it's really tough today, especially with like social media. Like all these, these teenagers are growing up with like Instagram and stuff, and like there's just so many ways to like feel bad about yourself by like going through that
It's,
experience. I
yeah.
was just, but I was also gonna say, like, I think another thing too is just like, whatever is making you feel like you're not good enough. I think it's important to like really work on that too. Like, make it, like make progress so you can feel better about it. Like, so in like, in your case, like if we're struggling to like, get girls, like, find something that we could get a little bit better at, like, talking or, just more, do things to get out of our comfort zone. Just like, work on it. Just, I'm a big believer in like kind of the growth mindset of just like making like little small progress, like, try to get 1% better every day at like whatever you're trying to get better at. And, don't be too
Uh,
hard on yourself in the process.
there's more to it than that. That problem specifically is a little bit complicated, but one thing that comes to mind that I strongly recommend, I actually think I should do more of it. That was the most beneficial for me was improv. Improv was like quite cheap
Mm.
and definitely get you more like a spontaneous way of thinking. Um, I will say like, yeah, if like a guy doesn't, they'd also have to have a social circle too. Um, I mean, a social circle would solve a lot of problems at once. And yeah, I mean, you're basically right. I would think like there's not really a whole lot else to to say about it. Um, or find some kind of like hobby to really invest in, poker being one of them, where you gain something that speaks to you. I would to just put it, for playing devil's advocate of sorts here. A lot of the people growing up, they look at people with kind of everything all the time, which is super annoying, right? Like that's actually one of the biggest reasons for um what's the word, violence, is precisely this disparity in classes that you're visiting. It's like if everyone's already all low class, it doesn't change anything, right? Or everyone has, kind of in a poor situation, it doesn't change anything. But if you're constantly witnessing people that are rich, it's actually, and they're next to them, their neighbors, this is actually like statistically one of the biggest clashes. It's why in like South Africa, or one of the reasons why, I don't want to like I don't know a ton of information about it, but it's one of the reasons why in many different cultures you see a lot of violence and all that. Actually, there's, in fact, anecdotally, um, I have mostly only had problems in the biggest cities, the mainstream cities that I went to: Los Angeles, New York, London, um, and that's it for actual crime. I didn't really face any crime problems anywhere else in the world. Is the funny thing, but yeah, I mean, it's also because people's value systems are really up these days. There's not really a whole lot to do about that on a small scale. Actually, I want to say I did create a solution of sorts, which is why I'm building the poker community to because communities are an answer to that. So you no longer feel the pressures of social media and all of that, while dealing with, you don't while just dealing with life. You deal with them less because you deal with the community. Does it make sense?
Yeah, yeah, no, that social comparison stuff is definitely real. Yeah, I remember something in a psych class where like basically people would rather like make 50K a year and live in a place where their neighbors are making 50K in a year than make like 75K a year, but their neighbors are making like 100. It was something of that nature. But like basically, it's all about like it's something about all like relative matters like way more to our psyche than like absolute wealth. So yeah, like you said, if you're like living in a place where like everybody else has more than you, like that can breed, hostility or just like rage, whatever. Um, yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on with in terms of like these large cities and stuff. There's a lot going on in terms of like why crime exists and why there's more crime, or if there is even more crime. I think in a lot of cases it's just more visible, but there's not necessarily even more in all cases. But yeah, I mean, certainly there are places where the cost of living is relatively high, and then there's a lot of people all over the income spectrum, and some have very little, some have a lot. So that can breed some of it. Yeah.
All right. So are you going to do anything about this mental health stuff, or have you?
Ooh, like in terms of like starting a support group or something of that nature.
Well, just,
Good.
you're doing something cool. If you're not,
I mean, it's an interesting idea. Like, I mean, I've certainly tried to like make it a point to be like open about it, just like, whether on social media or like a platform like this, and just, yeah, I mean, certainly always available if anybody wants to talk about mental health. I'd say talking to a professional is probably a better idea, but I am someone who's, experienced some mental health stuff, and feel like I have some insight to offer anyway. But yeah, I think generally just, communities and just, yeah, I mean, kind of, yeah, working through your problems. But I mean, there's a bunch of different approaches that need to be taken. um, but yeah, I mean, I know for me, I just want to stress again that like opening up was huge for me, and I could not have realized before that like just how many people are going through similar stuff. So I think if nothing else, just like trying to share whatever is plaguing you inside, because I know for me, like once it was very freeing once I like didn't just hold it in anymore and started being vulnerable and being willing to share. And at the moment it felt really embarrassing, I guess, but it was actually really kind of vindicating, and just made me feel a whole lot better.
that makes a lot of sense. I would say at the right time as well, the right time it's appropriate to be vulnerable. There's lots of bad times to be vulnerable, by the way.
Sure.
Um, like at a party, for example, is not a good time to be vulnerable. But it's
Yeah.
kind of like putting like a check raise in. Like sometimes putting in a check raise is like really the moment, but if you don't do it, it can really hurt your game. In this case, your mental health game. Um, so a vulnerable check raise is what I'm suggesting.
I definitely do feel that in poker. Like, there's definitely some spots where I just like, I feel like I don't want to like make some kind of like big bluff shove or something, but I'm just like, okay, if I don't do this, like, it's just because I whipped out. Like, there's no good excuse for not doing this, and I do it, and I think it's right. I mean, in general, I think it's the right play when I decide to just like suck it up and do it in those spots.
Yeah, I would say that pulling the trigger probably is overall beneficial trade, even if you get every once in a while. No one really
Yeah,
cares. It doesn't really matter in the long
yeah.
run. It
Sometimes it's
actually
not going to
matters
work
more if it
out,
does work.
but right,
Yeah,
it's not going to
but
work
when it
every
does,
time. But like, yeah, I think overall, if you feel like it's the right thing to do, ultimately, I mean, granted, in poker, it takes time to train your gut and whatnot. But yeah, in general, I think listening to intuition is good, and just the knowledge you have as well. Because a lot of those times it's that for me, where like and I know the theory says I should bluff a spot. I really don't want to, because I feel like this guy's not going to fold. But just gotta suck it up and do it sometimes.
yeah. It makes a lot of sense. I do want to. A thought comes to mind about this idea of being vulnerable, because a lot of women say, "Oh, they want a guy that's vulnerable," and all this bullshit. I mean, so I don't even know if I've had this problem precisely, but a friend of mine who has decades of experience with this in women, uh, would like strongly advocate like not being particularly vulnerable unless it's like the right time. Like he would have this story of how telling this girl like how his like dog died, and it's just she's just like, what the why is this guy telling me this right now? And then it ended up like screwing him over, and he like didn't see her again. And he's like, why did I do that? So I do want to like mention, you want to pick your spots to be vulnerable, not at a party, not the first time you're on a date. Where else? Not not probably not at the poker table, in front of everybody. I mean, that's not the worst, I guess, in some spots. Uh yeah, yeah, more like in private.
Yeah, it definitely
be a
depends one on
therapist.
who. Yeah, I think I'm more talking about like one-on-one conversations, and yeah, I think there's certainly, like you said, like yeah, maybe like the first date isn't a spot to spill a certain like major life secret or something, but
It can be. It can be.
it
It's
can
just more
be,
like
it can be.
it's more on the nature of the conversation. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not really something you want to jump into. Don't. The
yeah, I hear you
social
though. It's
media
more
says all these
complicated
dumb
than just
things.
like opening up about everything all the time. Like it still takes judging the situation and deciding on using your best instinct on like what the best time is to share a thing like a vulnerable thing.
Yeah. Well, any last thoughts or anything else you'd like to talk about before we wrap this up?
Um, no, I had a lot of fun coming on. So yeah, I mean, I make training videos on Run It Once, and I yeah, just enjoying the family and poker life, and I'll see some of you at the tables hopefully soon.
All right. Sweet. And by the way, you said you make videos on Run It Once, right?
Yes.
All right, sweet. So do I. So Run It Once, guys. Check out Run It
Yeah.
Once. Yeah, we use one of our affiliate codes. If you watch this thing, make us a little money. Maybe we'll give you some back also.